All right, we are live for our third class on this series of sexual alchemy. And in our class today, we're going to be exploring healing pathways for distorted programming around sex, sexuality, and our bodies. It is such a joy for me to welcome you into this conversation. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And for you who might be joining us for the first time, my name is Dimelo Mareri, and I am a spiritual healer, a woo medicine woman, and an embodied leadership guide based in Botswana. Welcome to this conversation today, which promises to be an expansive one that can also facilitate our growth. Yeah. And I just want to say apologies for this late start. We're having major technological glitches today due to the network. So the internet connection on my end isn't as strong as I would love for it to be for us to do this conversation. So yeah, bear with me about that. Okay, just waiting to see if the technological gods will agree with us in doing this today. It's definitely a conversation I'd love for us to have. And I'll just hang out here for a few moments and see how things go. Okay. Okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this third class of our series on sexual alchemy. And for you who are joining us in the space, please let me know. Let's just do a sound check, because I'd love to check whether you can hear me okay and also whether you can see me okay. So please let me know whether you can see me okay, whether you can hear me okay. And then we will dive into this conversation. Okay. All right, I'll just wait here for a moment to hear from you, to hear from y'all who are in the room. Please let me know if you can see me okay, if you can hear me okay. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Funke. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. So again, my sincere apologies for this late start. We're having such massive technological glitches today. My internet has been acting up since yesterday, and my hope had been that we would be okay for today, but yeah, that hasn't been quite the case. However, this conversation needs to happen, this conversation needs to go on, and I am excited for what we will be exploring today. So yeah, today we are continuing on the theme of healing the sexual wound. And today's conversation is part 2 of that conversation, where we are exploring exactly what this wound is and also exploring what the healing work for this wound might look like and that you might be invited into as an individual. Yeah. And so we just want to start off by appreciating that our sexual energy is pure life force energy that we are all born with, and that when we are born, it holds a very pure frequency. All right. And this energy, which is pure life force energy, is something to be protected, right? For the mere fact of it being a vital resource and a vital asset in our lives, right? It's something to be protected by, one, clearing the distortions and the interferences around it, right? So as we mentioned in our previous class, that it's an energy that when we are born, it's pure, like it is of a pure frequency. However, given how our world is currently wired and designed, it becomes distorted and interfered in a number of ways, right? And so with the understanding of it being a vital resource, it is therefore then something to be protected by, clearing the distortions and the interferences around it, such that we may wield it as an asset that actually serves us, as an asset that serves our lives, and as an asset that serves the evolution and the growth of our souls. All right. So that's something that felt quite key and emergent, as I was stepping into our conversation today. All right. And what's also been coming up is this invitation for us to be mindful of what we eat. All right. So just as we are mindful of what we put into our minds, right? There's also the invitation for us to be mindful of the food that we eat, right? And to eat in ways that clear up communication channels with our body or with our bodies, right? So from previous classes, you might remember that this sexual alchemy work is also a work of healing your body. So much of the wounding, much of the distortions actually happen on the body. All right. And a huge part of this wound, of this wounding, has been a disconnection with our bodies, has been a disconnection with the organic intelligence, with the original intelligence of our bodies, right? And so part of the work is to one, connect with our bodies, and also clear up communication channels with our bodies, right? And part of that work is for us to be really mindful of what we put into our bodies, to ensure that we are eating to live, and we are eating to be in deeper relationship with our bodies, right? We'll get more into this later in our class today, all right? And before we dive into our conversation for today, I just want to share a content warning that there might be a mention of trauma, and there might also be a mention of sexual trauma in our session today, all right? And I'm mentioning this as an invitation for you to resource yourself in the ways that you might need the most, right? And this is with the appreciation that even just the mention of the word trauma, even just the mention of the phrase sexual trauma can be triggering. It can trigger old wounds, it can trigger dormant pains, right? And we just want to resource ourselves a little extra to, I'd love to invite you to just deeply center into your body and to maintain a sense of awareness and a level of attunement with your body, to be able to feel where you're at, right? And if this conversation might become highly triggering, please, like, you're more than welcome to pause and come back to this conversation a little later, right? And so, just a brief pause, and then we'll dive into it. Okay. And for you who are here, just doing one last sound check, letting me know if you can hear me okay, and if you can see me okay. Yeah, the technologies are acting up today. But this is work that we're committed to do, and so we're all here. All right, we're going to continue with our conversation today, right? And today we're going to be exploring 4 sources of these distortions in this programming that is part of what sits at the root or at the core or as the source of the sexual wounding, right? And one of the 4 sources of this distorted programming, just, like right at the top, right? We want to bring our attention to our education system in the world that is not necessarily designed to liberate us, right? And when we're especially looking at education for around the specific matter of our sexuality as human beings, right? When we look back on our education, it's mostly been teaching centered around this being primarily for co-creation, right? And very little is said about how to cultivate your connection with your body and how to activate your body inner intelligence and inner knowing, right? And so when I say it is an education that is not necessarily geared towards or designed for liberation, especially around this matter, it is in the sense of these huge gaps around how to cultivate, around how to tap into in ways that serve us, right? To tap into our sexual energy, to understand it, to know how to navigate it, to know how to relate with it, to know how to engage with it, right? And secondly, just closely connected to that, right? We're also finding that while there are many aspects that are going really, really well, even within the education system itself, and also within our religious system, which is what I'm going to speak about shortly. So while there is a lot of good, and while there is a lot of light within these systems, we are seeing that with respect to our sexuality as human beings, there hasn't been much grounded and meaningful conversation and education around this, right? And so what we find in some of our religious systems is teachings that are often the same to what we find within our education system, right? Where the teaching is mostly around this being for procreation, and that the physical act itself is for procreation and only for married people, right? And so it's a teaching that mostly focuses on what not to do as opposed to what to do, right? So the question might be, okay, what do I do? How do I engage with this? How do I relate with this energy, right? So we find huge gaps, even like within our religious systems, around specific matter, right? And what we're also seeing around the system is teachings that perpetuate a disconnection with our bodies or to our bodies, right? We explored this in our previous class, right? Where we spoke about teachings that might perpetuate ideas of the body being something that we are to renounce, right? The body being something that we are to disconnect from quite directly as a teaching, right? And so when we're disconnecting from our bodies, we're essentially disconnecting from the seat of our organic wisdom around our sexuality, how it is to manifest and how it is to express itself, right? And so we're finding this double-edged sword, right, where there is limited education and where there's something being said, it is something that deeply disconnects us or takes us away from any opportunity of drawing from the inner knowing that is held within us, right? And this is why a huge part of the healing work for this, like when we speak about sexual healing, a huge component of this is of healing your relationship with your body, of reconnecting with your body, of coming home to your body, of learning to occupy and to be present in your body so that you may begin to activate the inner knowing of your body, such that you may begin to activate your own inner organic intelligence around how you're to move in the world, around how you're to navigate this matter in your life, right? And so part of the education that's also missing is around how to tap into sexual energy for healing, right? So when we say there's a gap in our education, that's part of it. It's like the missed conversation on how we can actually tap into this energy for the healing of our bodies, and of how we can step into the sacred space of our intimate relations as a space where you can heal. It's like leveraging on the physical act itself for your healing and for the evolution of your soul and for the growth of your being. That is actually one of the opportunities that are available to us, right? For us to step into our intimate relations from a space of sacredness, of knowing that even as we engage in the physical act itself, we can actually access healing for ourselves, for our bodies, for our lives, for our lineages, right? And speaking on there being this predominant teaching around the physical act only being for married people, I mean, there is a reason why there is a teaching like that, right? And this just emerges from the fact of the physical act being a deeply energetic and a deeply spiritual exchange, all right? Such that I suppose the easiest way around it was to just tell people to wait for marriage. But we also need to get into the why of waiting for marriage, right? Or why, or the why of, because marriage for me, it's essentially my understanding of it, part of it, why there would be a teaching to wait for marriage, right? It's because when we are in the space of marriage, ideally, we would have taken time to get to know our partner, deeply vetted them to ensure that this is someone that we actually want to be in such an energetic and a spiritual exchange with, right? However, the missing piece there is, what do people who are not yet married do? How do they engage with, how do they relate with their own sexual energy? All right. And I'm also seeing how this teaching, right, can create shame for the non-married people who are already engaging in the physical act, right? And this shame can create a disconnection and a separation from the true living source God, right? So they can be shame, they can be fear, the fear of being punished and of being exiled from heaven. And also a guilt, which can be a self-punishment for the individual who is engaging and who doesn't have the space in the church to have open conversation about what's happening in their lives and how they can better engage with this energy in ways that serve them, in ways that serve their spirituality, in ways that serve their connection and their relationship with God, the true living source God. All right? And so this is part of what we see missing in our society and in our communities, all right? Where within our churches, if we're just told is for procreation and only for married people, there is so much more that could be said. The education there is quite limited, right? And oftentimes it can be limiting, especially if we are told to just repress it and pretend it doesn't exist and to suppress it, right? It can be limiting in the sense that when we're repressing and when we're suppressing it, it can often manifest, because it's energy, it's alive, it's moving. It can often manifest in unhealthy expressions of this energy, right? And sometimes these unhealthy expressions can be violent in nature, right? Where instead of engaging freely, right, without hiding, without guilt, we find that behind the curtains, unhealthy patterns can begin to emerge, right? We spoke about this in detail in the previous class, right? So please do check that out. And so, as we mentioned, like, there is an invitation here for us to heal and expand our understanding of who the true living source God is, and to come into a more expanded relationship with this consciousness, right? I find this to actually be one of the core elements within sexual healing. Because a lot of the distortions, since there hasn't been meaningful and grounded conversation in the home and in the schools, a lot of it has come or has been internalized from the church. However, that hasn't opened us up to understand more what this is, because it's still a taboo subject, even in our religious spaces, right? And so there's an invitation for us to heal our God wound, and there's also an invitation for us to heal the religious wound, right? Yeah. And what we're also finding is that in the absence of meaningful and grounded conversation or education on this matter of sex, sexuality, and our bodies in our homes, in our schools, and in our community. What most of us end up turning to as a source of learning how to engage with our sexual energy. Because some learning has to happen, some exploration has to happen, right? And so what usually ends up happening is that we turn to the thing that is right in front of us. And for many of us, it's television. All right? And so here we find ourselves engaging with the media and entertainment industry. All right? Where we are watching movies, where we are watching music videos that operate through the function of suggestion. All right? So when you're watching that movie, when you're watching that music video, when you're watching whatever it is that you might be watching, it is that content that you're taking in, that you're engaging with, is suggesting to you ideas and ways of being that are often then accepted as true. All right? And so on this matter of our sexuality is of watching content that might suggest to us how we are to behave, how we are to express our sexual energy, how it is to manifest, how we are to treat each other in intimate relationships. All right? This is actually where most of us learned to express our sexuality. So for us who are in the Southern African region, and those who might be around my age, if you grew up in those times, you might have had access to the late night shows on ETV on a Friday, where a lot of us actually learned to how to engage, how to relate with our sexual energy, how to express it, right? And so this then also becomes the source of how we think the physical act is to be done. And it also makes an impression of who we are as men, as women, as non-binary beings, and also as sexual beings. All right? And so this actually holds the invitation for us. This is part of the healing work. It holds the invitation for us to deeply explore and look at the ideas that we hold, the beliefs that we hold, the stories that we hold about what it means to be a man, a woman, a non-binary individual who is also a sexual being. Ideas that we hold about how this thing is supposed to be done, how it's supposed to look like, and also reflecting on where you learned that, right? And also reflecting on how did what you learned and where you learned it inform how you currently show up in your intimate interactions, in your intimate spaces. Okay? And another impact of what we're learning from the media and entertainment system is how we are to treat each other in intimate relations. It's so weird. Like, oftentimes I think it happens without us even realizing what's happening, right? Because you're then watching a movie and you accept the suggestion as true, that, oh, this is how I should engage with my partner. This is what I should say to my partner. This is how I need to behave in our relationship. Some of which are not organic, some of which are distorted, and distorted I mean where the natural or the organic manifestation or the organic architecture of the thing has been interfered with. where the inner coding of that behavior is not sitting within its true architecture as it was created from source, God. Right? And in the absence of a real and grounded education, we find that these suggestions that we receive from the entertainment and the media systems become accepted as true, often unconsciously, like we're not even aware of. Like, where did you learn how to relationship? Yeah, like if mom and dad, auntie, uncle didn't have this conversation with you, where did you learn how to do relationships, right? And so these suggestions grow to be accepted as true, and they also grow to inform how we relate with each other and how we relate with our own sexual energy, right? And so as we grow our understanding around how some of these suggestions are not necessarily seated within the organic infrastructure of our template of sexuality, of our template of intimacy, they are currently not holding the original source coding within which these matters were created. Right? There's been a lot of distortions, there's been a lot of interferences, right? And so with that understanding, we're then being invited, this is part of the healing work, we're then being invited to clear these suggestions and to return to our original and organic intelligence. Right? So that is an energetic work. It's a spiritual work that you can have a practitioner hold space for you to deeply dive into this work, right? And that is also a work I offer in my healing containers, especially the private healing program. But you can also book a once-off healing session for us to do some of this work, right? And a huge part of that work also, because our intelligence, our original intelligence is held within the body. And so a huge part of that work is to return to your body. For most of us, our socialization has taught us to live mostly from the head, to exist in our head space, right? And this work invites us to also bring our presence into the body, to come into relationship with the body, to also connect and activate our receptivity of the intelligence of our bodies. Because that will guide you. It's like if you're wondering, so where do I learn how to express and to manifest my sexual energy? Your body holds the keys. Your body holds the keys. So however, given the wounding that has happened for a lot of us, right? Part of which has been a severing, like our connection with our body has been severed, right? And so we want to come back into the body. We want to reconnect with the wisdom of our bodies. As men, as women, as non-binary individuals, this is for everyone, right? We want to return to the body and to return to the wisdom of your bodies, right? Yeah. And let's just pause for a minute to take that in, and we'll then explore the final bits of today's conversation. Whew. I'm just operating with the trust and the faith that y'all can see me and hear me okay, because my internet is just like not cooperating today. All right, so a final piece on this, and this is within the media and the entertainment system, right? Where a lot of us have grown accustomed to engaging in porn, watching pornography, right? And this specific content, the way it's designed, the way it's built, it makes very strong suggestions of how to express our sexual energy and how to treat each other in intimate relationships, right? For example, it makes very strong suggestions, remember, which can be accepted as true when you're engaging with this content, right? For example, it can have the effect, it can make very strong suggestions of how women are to behave, of how men are to behave, of how men are to treat women, of how women are to treat men in the space of heterosexual relationships, right? And so what we're finding, I think it was probably in the previous class where we spoke about the potency of frequency held in music, right? And here we also want to bring, or just to expand our understanding around the potency of frequency held within what we watch and what we hear. It literally has the potential to shift our inner wiring, right? And so what we're finding here is that with this specific content and the suggestions that it makes to our inner being that can be accepted as true, these suggestions can distort and they can interfere with the organic or the original blueprint of our sexual energy, right? Where in its original form, it was meant to be fun, it was meant to be liberating, it was meant to be pleasurable, I believe, right? And for some reason, it's now being portrayed in a way that it can sometimes be violent, it can be painful, it can be harmful. And so this even has the potential to shift how our bodies move and how we think we are to move. This is where the body healing work comes in, right? Because as we're engaging with this content, it actually affects the very makeup of our bodies. It's literally a trauma, it's a wounding. When we're being shifted from our natural organic nature by something that we're engaging with, something that we're taking in, that is a wounding, that is a trauma. Like it is introducing into your being, into your system, something that is foreign and something that is actually not organic. And I believe something that is not of the true living source God, right? And I forgot to mention this, right? In these teachings, please, you want to take what resonates, right? Like you want to lean into your inner authority and then take what resonates and leave the rest. Okay? And so what we find is that as we're engaging with this content that can sometimes portray the physical act to one that can be violent, one one that's painful, that's harmful, it can actually normalize violence perpetuated through intimate relations, I mean. And often this is something that is very subtle. Like, we often don't see it happening, right? But if you're to look at, where did I learn that this has to be painful? Or where did I learn that it should be violent to bring me pleasure? Yeah, that's food for thought, a point of reflection, okay? And also, quite often, we're finding that these very strong suggestions that are being made by this content that we're engaging, specifically the P, right? I'm saying the P because the artificial intelligence can pick on our words and it cancels out some of it, right? Is often how, without us knowing, we can find ourselves consenting to sexual abuses and violence, right? So by us engaging with this content that can sometimes portray this which is supposed to be a sacred exchange, a sacred interaction, how this content can portray it as something where abuses are perpetrated, we are subconsciously and without knowing actually consenting to, at an energetic and at a spiritual level. Without us knowing, we are actually consenting to abuses and violence of this nature. It is as though by logging on and watching this, we're saying, I agree with this happening, not only to this woman or man, but to it happening in the world, right? And so this is where also our leadership comes into this conversation, right? The appreciation that how we engage in our individual lives actually has an impact on what's happening in broader society and in the broader world, right? Remember, the sexual wound, it's individual and it's also collective, right? And at an energetic and a spiritual level, when we engage with material that portrays such abuses, it's like we're giving a nod. We're saying, yes, I agree with this happening in the world, right? And we may even find ourselves sometimes getting a kick out of acts of sexual violence, right? And this is not something to feel shame about or feel guilt about, because it is a programming, it's a distortion, it's a program that's literally been inserted into our organic, our original template of sexuality, of intimacy, of pleasure, right? However, when you find that happening, when you get a kick from fantasizing or thinking about or watching violence of this nature, that is an invitation to heal, because that is actually not organic, right? And often this is part of how sexual violence is born, right? From these distortions, not only flowing from P, right? From these distortions, from the inversions, from the insertions, right? And also from the wounded conditioning that we explored in the previous class, all right? And I know that this can be heavy to take in, right? But just given this understanding of what we have just explored, part of the healing, part of the proactive healing might possibly be to stop watching porn. There's actually so much magic out there that you can do with your body, that you can explore with your body. Like when you step into the sexual alchemy work of healing and also of exploring the inner knowing and the organic intelligence of your body, you will find that porn actually pales in comparison to what sits within your body and to what is possible through your body. All right? And so, yeah, key is for us to be very mindful of the content that we are engaging, because like it's a literal programming. Like imagine, I think I used this example in our introductory class, that human beings are technologies, our bodies, our psyches are technologies. Like we operate as, like Microsoft Word has a coding, all right, that ensures that it works properly. So sometimes we find that given what's going on in our world, because there's a lot happening, there can be like foreign coding that is inserted into our original organic coding that distorts, that affects, that kind of like interferes or moves us away from how that original Microsoft Word program is supposed to function. Often we're not aware of it because it's very subtle, right? And so we ought to be very mindful of the content that we engage, of what we take into our being, into our psyches, right? So this speaks to content, and it also speaks to, remember how at the beginning of this class we spoke about food, the invitation to eat, to live, so that you may clear up communication channels with your body. I'm going to speak to that in a bit, right? So additional to what, to be mindful of the content that we take in, part of the healing is to also energetically and spiritually clear the distortions in the imprint of the programming, right? This is an energetic healing work. It's a spiritual healing work, right? And there's also the invitation for us to identify the ideas, the beliefs, the stories that we might have internalized, right? About what it means to be a man, a woman, a non-binary being who is also a sexual being. About ideas about how the physical act is to be done, how our sexual energy is to be made manifest, is to be expressed in the world and in intimate relations. There's an invitation for us to sit and deeply reflect on and identify those beliefs, those stories, those ideas, and rewire those that are not aligned with our organic or our original blueprint, right? How will you know that it is aligned with your original or organic blueprint? It should grow you. It should make you feel good, truly. Good, I mean, not like how junk food makes us good, but like something that is enlivening, something that gives you life, you know? You know how there's a difference between food that after you've eaten, you feel very sleepy and you want to sleep, and food that after eating, you feel very energetic and alive, right? So you want to go for the bit that makes you feel alive, that makes you feel good in that way. That's how you know something is aligned with your organic original blueprint. It should bring life to your atoms, to your cells, give you life at cellular level, right? And you will also know that it's aligned with your organic or original blueprint when it heals you, when it evolves you, when it evolves your soul, right? And when it liberates you. And so when you're engaging with content, you want to look, right? Does this content, when I'm looking at this man and this woman engaging in this particular way, does this content liberate me? Does it expand me? Or does it make me small? Does it contract me? Right? And part of the healing work there is the invitation for us to clear unprocessed emotions from the impact and the imprint of the programming. Yeah. And key, very important, as we have explored today, a huge part of the healing is to return or to reconnect with your body and activate your body's organic, original intelligence, right? Around this aspect of your being. And I would even want to suggest that we do physical cleanses, right? To clear the energetic debris that sits around our bodies and our energetic bodies, our auric fields, right? That carries distortions, that carries inversions, right? And part of the healing work is also womb healing, right? To clear the distortions and the frequencies that are held here in the womb space. As part of the spaces, one of the spaces through which we engage with our sexual energy, right? And finally, we want to eat to live. We want to eat food that clears up communication channels with our bodies, right? And so this is actually an invitation for us. We want to look at the ingredients and the things that we eat, okay? And some foodies usually say if you can't pronounce it, you shouldn't eat it, right? But food is such a big deal because some of what we put in our bodies, instead of giving us life, it can actually like dumb down the intelligence of our bodies, right? So there's an education and a healing work that is needed around that space, okay? Yeah. And yeah, so that feels complete for our conversation and our class today. My sincere apologies about these glitches with my network and connection today. And finally, I just want to say, for you who might be feeling called to this work and you who might want to go deeper with this work and heal, I have 2 healing offers that you can tap into. You can either book a once-off private healing session with me, or you can apply for my private healing program, where we would work together for a minimum of 4 months, right? And just deeply dive into this work and facilitate healing at a deep level, right? And so until our next class, until the next time, bye.